2 guards had my wrists before I had finished plating the morning bread, and neither one would tell me what I was being charged with, only that a war council does not explain itself to kitchen girls, and that I should consider myself fortunate they had not simply thrown me in a cell without the courtesy of walking me there. I did not fight them. There did not seem to be much point. I only asked, once, whether anyone had thought to tell him where I was going, and the guard who answered laughed like I had, said something very stupid, and told me a king does not concern himself with the whereabouts of a girl who slides bowls under doors. He was wrong about that. He just did not know it yet. 4 months earlier, I did not even know his name either, when I first knelt outside his door with a bowl of soup he had not asked for and had no reason to want. My name is Bryn, and I have worked in Greywatch's kitchens since I was 12, which meant that by the time the war ended, I understood exactly one thing better than anyone else in that castle: how to feed people who did not think they wanted to be fed. The war against the Eastern Territories had ended 3 weeks before the king stopped eating, a peace signed in blood and exhaustion rather than victory, the kind that leaves everyone alive too tired to celebrate. Greywatch had won, if you could call it that. We had also buried a great many of our own, including, I did not know this yet, that first week, the one man King Ivor had trusted more than his own reflection. He shut himself in his rooms 3 days after the peace was signed, and did not come out, and did not eat, and every healer and general and adviser the keep possessed tried the door and failed. And by the 4th day, the whole castle had settled into the particular hush of people watching something they do not know how to stop. I heard the whole thing second-hand, the way kitchen girls hear everything, the head cook relaying it between orders, a steward complaining to no one in particular while he waited on bread, the laundry women trading rumours over the washtubs. The healers had tried broths, tinctures, formal petitions written in careful court hands. The generals had tried reminding him, gently at first, and then less gently, that a kingdom newly at peace still needed its king upright and visible. His own sister, Lady Runa, was said to have knelt outside that door for the better part of an afternoon and gotten nothing but silence for her trouble. I remember thinking, scrubbing pots that had nothing to do with any of it, that a man who could turn away his own sister was not a man anyone was likely to reach with a tray of broth and a lecture. I was 22, and I had no standing in that castle worth mentioning, and no one had asked my opinion on any of it, which is precisely why, on the 4th night, I filled a bowl with the soup my mother used to make when I was too sick to want anything else, and carried it up to the king's door myself. I did not knock. Everyone who had knocked had been turned away, and it occurred to me, standing there, that a man who did not want to be asked anything was unlikely to want one more person asking. So I knelt and slid the bowl beneath the door, and left before anyone could tell me I was not permitted to be there. An hour later, I came back to collect it, mostly expecting to find it untouched. The bowl was empty. Bron found me in the kitchen the next morning, a broad, stern-faced man who had inherited the king's second's duties rather suddenly and rather unwillingly 3 weeks earlier, and who looked, standing in my doorway, like a man who had not slept properly since. "You're the one who left the bowl. I didn't ask permission, if that's what you're here about. I'll take the punishment, whatever it is. I'm not here about punishment." He looked, for a moment, almost undone. He ate, girl, 3 days of healers and generals, and his own sister on her knees outside that door, and he ate for you. I need you to do it again tonight. And tomorrow. And however many nights it takes. I did it again that night. And the night after. And within a fortnight it had become an arrangement no one spoke of directly, but everyone in the kitchens understood. I cooked what the king's own mother might have made him as a boy. Plain food. Unfussy food. And left it without a word. And it came back empty. And slowly, so slowly, I almost did not notice it happening. The King of Greywatch began attending council again, began being seen in the corridors, began, in every way that mattered to the men who ran his kingdom, recovering. Somewhere around the second week, he started leaving the bowl a little differently, pushed back through the gap rather than simply set down, close enough to the door that I understood, without either of us saying so. That he was waiting on the other side of it when I came to collect it. "You never stay to watch me eat it," he said, one night through the wood. It was the first thing he had ever said to me directly. "I didn't think you'd want an audience." "I don't. I find I mind rather less than I expected, in your case." A pause, careful, the kind I would come to recognize as the sound of a man deciding how much to risk saying. "What's your name?" "Bryn, Bryn," he said it slowly, like he was testing the shape of it. "Thank you, Bryn, for not knocking." "You're welcome, Your Grace." "Ivar," he said, "if you're going to keep feeding me back to life, you may as well use my name doing it." I did not tell him, that night, that I already knew it. Everyone in Greywatch knew his name. What I had not known, until that exact moment, was what it sounded like offered to me on purpose, instead of simply overheard. It was around then that Lord Bastian started noticing me too. Bastian sat at the head of the War Council in all but title, a war-hardened elder who had brokered the peace treaty's harshest terms himself, one of which, the one nobody had told me about until Bronn did, grim-faced, over a pot of barley, required Greywatch's king to marry a foreign princess within the year, to seal the peace in blood and grandchildren the way old treaties always insisted on sealing things. "He's not going to like that I'm telling you this," Bronn said. "But you deserve to know what you're standing in the middle of, before Bastian decides you're an obstacle worth removing." Bastian found me within the week, in the kitchen corridor, flanked by two men who did not introduce themselves. "I understand the king has taken a particular liking to your cooking," he said. "Pleasant in the way powerful men are pleasant right before they stop being so. Admirable, useful, even in its narrow way. I trust you understand, it does not extend beyond the kitchen door. I've never claimed it did, my lord. See that it continues not to. Greywatch has a treaty to honour, and a king who has finally remembered how to function is a king who needs to remember his obligations along with it. A kitchen girl, who forgets her place at the wrong moment, could undo a great deal more than she understands." He studied me a moment longer. I would hate for something so small to cause a problem so large. I told him, I understood. I did not tell him that I had already decided, weeks before, that I intended to keep doing exactly what I had been doing, regardless of what any lord thought my place was. Lady Runa found me an hour later, in the kitchen garden, wringing what remained of my composure out over a bed of winter herbs. I had seen her only from a distance before. The king's sister, sharp-eyed and plainly dressed for someone of her rank, with the particular exhaustion of a woman who had spent a month running a grieving household nobody else seemed capable of running. "Bastian cornered you," she said. "Not a question. He does that. Corners people. It is, regrettably, the thing he is best at. I wasn't aware I mattered enough to corner. You feed my brother when 3 of the finest healers in this territory could not. You matter a great deal, whether either of you has admitted it yet." She studied me for a moment, not unkindly. I knelt outside his door for an entire afternoon, and got nothing. "I don't resent you for succeeding where I failed. I only want you to understand what you are standing in the middle of before Bastian decides to remind you himself more forcefully than he already has." Bronn said something similar. Bronn is not wrong often. She turned to go, then paused. "For what it is worth, I have not seen my brother's face do half the things it has done this month since before the war. Whatever you are doing, do not let Bastian talk you out of it." He opened the door himself on the 22nd night, which he had never done before, and stood there looking at me the way you look at someone you have spent 3 weeks imagining and gotten only partly right. "You could simply come in, you know," he said. "The whole kingdom already suspects you're the reason I'm alive. There's very little scandal left to protect." I stepped inside, bowl still in my hands, and found a room that looked exactly like a man had stopped living in it 3 weeks before, and only recently remembered he was allowed to again. A window unshuttered for the first time in a month, a fire actually lit, a chair that had clearly been sat in. "Why soup?" he asked. "Every healer in this castle brought me broths and tinctures and lectures about strength. You brought soup and said nothing at all." "Because grief doesn't want lectures," I said. "It wants someone to sit with it until it's ready to be hungry again." I didn't know what you needed. I only knew what I'd have wanted. If it were me. Something moved across his face, quick, private, gone before I could name it. "You don't know what happened," he said. "In the East. What it cost. No, I don't. I'm not ready to tell you. I didn't ask you to." He looked at me for a long moment, and I understood, watching him, that this was the first conversation he had allowed himself with anyone in 3 weeks that did not require him to perform being fine, and that he did not quite know what to do with a person who was not waiting for him to. He did not reach for me. I did not reach for him. We stood there instead, close enough that I could feel the fire's warmth on both of us, and let the silence be the only thing that touched. "You should go," he said, eventually, though he did not move to open the door for me. "It's late, and my council would have a great deal to say about a kitchen girl in the king's chambers after dark." "Your council has a great deal to say about most things." That surprised a laugh out of him, short and rusty, like a sound he had not used in some time, and was not entirely sure still worked. "They do. I have found, lately, that I mind their opinions rather less than I am supposed to." "Careful, Your Grace. That sounds dangerously close to enjoying yourself. Does it?" He studied me for a moment in the firelight, and something in his face, still careful, still guarded, softened at the edges in a way I felt more than saw. I had forgotten what that felt like. I am not certain I remember the rules. There aren't any rules. That's rather the point of it. I left before either of us could decide what to do with that, and I walked back to the kitchens that night, thinking less about the empty bowl in my hands than about the sound of his laugh, and how badly I wanted to hear it again. I did not know his second's name yet, that night. I did not know what had truly happened in the East, or why an entire war council seemed more frightened of a kitchen girl than of the peace treaty they had fought so hard to secure. If you want to find out what a king finally says out loud after 3 weeks of silence, and whether a girl with nothing but soup and stubbornness can survive a war council that has decided she's in the way, stay with me. The hardest part of this story has not happened yet, and I lived through every second of it. Bron told me the rest 3 nights later, because someone had to, and because he said he was tired of watching me try to help a man while missing half of what needed helping. "His name was Torin," Bron said. "The king's second, since they were boys together, closer than brothers. In the final battle, Ivar gave the order to hold the eastern ridge 1 more hour, to let the wounded clear the field, and Torin took that ridge personally, because he did not trust anyone else with it, and it held exactly as long as it needed to, and it cost him everything." Bron's jaw worked. Ivar has not said his name once since the funeral. Not to his sister. Not to me. He gave the order that got his best friend killed, and he has been trying to atone for it by refusing to be a person who still gets to enjoy something as simple as a meal. I did not say anything for a long moment. I was doing the arithmetic of 3 weeks. Every empty bowl. Every silence. Every night he let a stranger feed him, because a stranger did not know enough to ask the question that mattered. "He should have told me," I said. "He couldn't." Saying it out loud makes it real in a way 3 weeks of silence didn't. You should understand, that's not weakness, whatever the council wants to call it. That's a man trying to survive the only way he knew how. Something in me went very still and very clear. The specific stillness of understanding, finally, exactly what I was standing in the middle of, and exactly what I intended to do about it. Then I'm going to help him say it, I said, however long that takes. I did not try to force it. I had learned by then that Ivar was not a door that opened faster for being knocked on harder, so I simply started leaving a second bowl beside the first. Small things, useless things, the kind of food a boy might have loved before a crown ever sat on his head, and let him decide, each time, whether he wanted to tell me why. Torin used to steal these, he said one night, looking at a plate of honeyed pastries I had not asked him about at all. From this exact kitchen. We were 7. I was terrible at it, and he was not, and he never once let me forget the difference. He did not say anything else that night. He did not need to. It was the first time in 4 months I had heard him say the name out loud to anyone, even if the anyone was only me, through a door he had, by then, mostly stopped needing to hide behind. He sounds like he was worth stealing pastries with, I said. He was worth considerably more than that. I am only now learning how to say so, without it costing me something I am not sure I can afford to keep paying. Bastian moved faster than either of us expected. Within a week, the betrothal to Princess Ellen of the Eastern Territories was announced. A formal ceremony, full council, full court, set for the first frost. Timed precisely to make certain no one had room to object before it became law. I did not need Bronn to tell me whose idea the timing was. 2 days before the ceremony, Bastian summoned the head cook and asked, very formally, whether anyone had thought to test the king's food for the last month, given how mysteriously improved his condition had become. And whether it did not strike anyone as suspicious that a kitchen girl with no family, no house, and no reason to be trusted had somehow succeeded where trained healers had failed. By that evening, there was a formal inquiry. By the next morning, there were guards. 2 guards had my wrists before I had finished plating the morning bread, and neither one would tell me what I was being charged with, only that a war council does not explain itself to kitchen girls, and that I should consider myself fortunate they had not simply thrown me in a cell without the courtesy of walking me there. I did not fight them. There did not seem to be much point. I only asked, once, whether anyone had thought to tell him where I was going, and the guard who answered laughed like I had said something very stupid, and told me a king does not concern himself with the whereabouts of a girl who slides bowls under doors. He was wrong about that. He just did not know it yet. They put me in a bare room off the guard hall. Not quite a cell, close enough to one that the distinction hardly mattered, and left me there long enough that I had given up guessing how long it had been. I spent most of it doing the only useful thing available to me, which was refusing to cry in front of the guard posted at the door, and thinking, with a clarity that surprised me, that if this was the price of 4 months of empty bowls, I would have paid it again without hesitating. When the door finally opened, I braced myself for Bastian, or for a magistrate, reading a charge I had not committed. It was not a guard. Ivar filled that doorway the way I imagine he had once filled doorways on a battlefield, and for the first time since the night he opened his own door to me, I saw, plainly, the king his council had spent 3 weeks waiting for. Bastian tried to have you removed on a charge he manufactured out of nothing, he said, and I have spent the last hour reminding my war council exactly whose kingdom this is. Is that meant to reassure me? It's meant to be an apology. I'm told I'm not very good at those yet. He crossed the small room in 3 strides and knelt in front of the chair they had left me in, an image so far beneath a king's dignity that I nearly told him to stop, except that I did not want him to. I should have told my counsel what you meant to me before Bastian had the chance to make you a target. I was a coward about it. I have apparently made something of a habit of cowardice this year. You weren't a coward. You were grieving. I was both, he said. I am trying to no longer be either. He took me by the hand, not gently, exactly, more like a man who had decided he was done letting anyone tell him what he was allowed to hold on to, and walked me directly into the great hall, where the betrothal ceremony was already half assembled, Princess Elin seated in uncomfortable, visible confusion beside an empty throne, Bastian mid-sentence, in front of the full war council. The room went silent the way rooms do when the person walking into them was not expected to arrive holding a kitchen girl's hand. I recognized faces in that hall, council lords who had walked past me in corridors without a second glance, healers who had failed at the door I had opened without trying, generals who had never once thought to ask a kitchen girl what she thought about anything. Every one of them was looking at me now, and I understood, standing there in a plain wool dress that had never been meant for a great hall, that I had never once cared less what any of them thought. Your Grace, Bastian said, recovering fast, this is highly irregular. So was accusing an innocent girl of treason to clear a path for a wedding, Ivar said. Let's discuss irregular. He turned to the full hall then, and I watched him do the hardest thing I had ever seen a person do in front of an audience. His name was Torin, Ivar said, and his voice, for the first time in the 4 months I had known it, was not steady at all. My second, my closest friend, since we were 7 years old, stealing pastries from this very kitchen together. I gave the order that put him on the eastern ridge. I have not said his name aloud since we buried him, because saying it made it true, and I was not ready for it to be true. And I let that cowardice nearly cost me the one person who fed me back to life without asking me for a single thing in return. His eyes found mine. I am done being ready for nothing. Lord Bastian will answer to this council for manufacturing a treason charge against an innocent woman. And I will not be signing a betrothal today, or any day soon, to anyone but the person standing beside me, if she will still have me after the year I have put her through. Princess Elin, to her considerable credit, looked less devastated than relieved, and said into the stunned silence that she had personally found the whole arrangement fairly dreadful, and would be delighted to discuss a treaty renewed on trade terms instead of marriage vows, which several council members found considerably more useful than they expected a jilted princess to be. Bastian did not fare so well. Stripped of his council seat, his manufactured charge against me formally struck from every record, exiled from war council proceedings for the remainder of his life, Ivar was, I learned, capable of being extremely thorough when he had finally decided to stop being careful. Bronn told me later that Bastian's final protest, before he was escorted from the hall, was that he had only ever been acting in the kingdom's best interest. Nobody in that room found the argument especially convincing, least of all from a man who had tried to have an innocent woman imprisoned to clear his own political path. I kissed him first, in front of the entire war council, and one remarkably good-natured foreign princess. Because I had spent 4 months feeding a man back to life, one bowl at a time, and I was not about to wait one more day to find out what the rest of him tasted like when he was not grieving in silence. And it was brief, and warm, and settled something in me that had been braced for 4 months against exactly this kind of looking. The fallout was mostly gratitude, this time, which made a pleasant change. The kitchens got a formal budget increase, on Ivar's specific order, which the head cook still thanks me for weekly whether or not I had anything to do with it. Bronn was confirmed as the king's second in truth, rather than in unwilling accident, and has told me, more than once, that watching Ivar learn to be happy again is the single best part of a job he never asked for. Ivar's wolf, once he had finally let himself feel anything again, developed an attachment to the kitchens that no amount of royal dignity has since managed to override. I have found him, more than once, sprawled directly across the doorway of the pantry, immovable, radiating enormous satisfaction, while an entire trade delegation waited outside for a king who had apparently decided a nap near the flour barrels took precedence. Bronn has stopped apologising for it. I think, secretly, he finds it as funny as I do. We still eat soup together most nights, the same recipe my mother used to make, though these days he actually looks at me while I make it, instead of only hearing me through a door. He told me once, quietly, that Torrin would have liked me, would have teased him mercilessly about the kitchen girl who outstubborned an entire war council, and that he thinks, now, he can hold both things at once, the grief and the good thing that came after it, without one cancelling out the other. Lady Runa has taken to visiting the kitchens uninvited, ostensibly to check on the budget increase, actually to steal honeyed pastries and tell me, with visible relish, embarrassing stories about her brother as a boy. I have decided I like her enormously, and I suspect the feeling is mutual, given how often she finds a reason to be in my kitchen at exactly the hour I am baking. A small stone plaque went up in the eastern garden that spring, plain and unadorned, with Torrin's name on it and nothing else. Ivar chose the wording himself and told me he wanted it simple, because Torrin had never once cared for grand gestures and would have found an elaborate memorial unbearably funny in exactly the way that would have made Ivar laugh too, eventually, once enough time had passed to let him. The healers who had failed at his door that first week still nod to me now, whenever we pass in the corridors, with an expression I have decided to interpret as professional respect rather than lingering embarrassment. I do not tease them about it. Much, Princess Ilyn wrote once, that winter, a brief and cheerful letter informing us that she had since fallen thoroughly in love with a shipping merchant her own council would never in 100 years have approved, and thanking us both, with what I choose to believe was genuine sincerity, for the treaty that had spared her a wedding she had never wanted in the first place. Ivar keeps the letter in a drawer in his study. I have caught him rereading it, more than once, with the particular satisfaction of a man glad to have accidentally done someone else a kindness on his way to doing himself one. The kitchens have never once returned to how they were before any of this started, and I have decided I prefer them this way, louder, busier, full of a king who wanders in at odd hours pretending he only came for the bread, and stays considerably longer than any loaf of bread requires. I never knocked, that first night. I have never once regretted it. I still wonder what would have happened if Bronn had been a day slower finding me, or if I had let Bastion's warning frighten me into stopping. I do not like where that thought ends, so I do not finish it. But I wonder about you. Did you guess, before I told you, what Ivar was really carrying? Or did Torrin's name surprise you as much as it surprised that hall? Tell me your theory in the comments. Comment the bowl if you want to hear about the first time Ivar's wolf tried to steal an entire trade delegation's lunch. And if you want more nights, like this one, a king who finally learnt to say the hardest name he owned, a girl who never once asked for permission to care about someone, and a kingdom that discovered soup can do what healers could not. Stay close. There is more of Greywatch left to tell. Where are you listening from tonight? I would love to know.